The unexpected discovery Captain Jake Morrison never expected his routine mining expedition to Europa to change the course of human history. The ice-covered moon had been humanity's latest frontier, promising rich deposits of rare minerals beneath its frozen surface. But when his deep-core drilling equipment struck something that definitely wasn't ice, Jake knew his quiet life was about to get very complicated. The object his team extracted was unlike anything in the geological surveys. It was a crystalline structure, perfectly symmetrical, and it hummed with an energy that made his teeth ache. Dr. Rebecca Torres, the expedition's chief scientist, ran every test she could think of. The results made no sense. The crystal was generating its own power, emitting electromagnetic frequencies that shouldn't exist, and somehow responding to human proximity. "This isn't natural," Rebecca whispered, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. "This is technology, Jake. Advanced technology that's been buried under Europa's ice for who knows how long." Jake studied the readings on Rebecca's scanner. The numbers were impossible. The crystal was producing energy signatures that exceeded anything humanity had ever created. More disturbing was the way it seemed to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats, as if it was somehow aware of their presence. That's when she appeared. The air around the crystal began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. Jake's first instinct was to reach for his sidearm, but something about the distortion made him pause. There was a grace to it, a purposeful elegance that suggested intelligence rather than threat. She materialized slowly, as if stepping through a curtain of light. Tall and humanoid, with skin that seemed to shift between silver and blue depending on the angle of the light. Her hair was white as starlight, and her eyes held depths that spoke of centuries of accumulated wisdom. But it was her expression that caught Jake off guard. She looked at him with recognition, as if she'd been waiting for him specifically. "You found it," she said, her voice carrying an accent from no earthly language. After all these centuries, a human finally found the beacon. Jake's hand moved instinctively to his weapon, but Rebecca placed a restraining hand on his arm. There was something about the alien's demeanor that spoke of urgency rather than hostility. "I am Zephyra," she continued, her gaze shifting between Jake and Rebecca, guardian of the Nexus Coalition. "And you, Captain Morrison, are about to discover that humanity's greatest test isn't conquering the stars. It's proving you deserve to survive among them." The crystal's humming intensified, and Jake felt a tugging sensation in his chest, as if something deep inside him was responding to its call. Whatever this was, whatever they'd stumbled into, he had the sinking feeling that there was no going back. The galactic ultimatum, Zephyra's words, hung in the recycled air of the mining station like a sword waiting to fall. Jake found himself studying her face, searching for any hint of deception or threat. What he found instead was something far more unsettling: genuine concern. "The beacon you discovered," Zephyr explained, gesturing to the still humming crystal, "is part of a network that spans this galaxy. It activates when a species reaches a certain level of technological development. A test, if you will, to determine whether they're ready to join the galactic community." Rebecca stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "What kind of test?" Zephyra's expression darkened. "The kind that determines whether your species lives or dies. The hegemony has been watching humanity's expansion into space. They've seen your wars, your conflicts, your tendency toward violence. They believe you're a threat that needs to be eliminated before you spread beyond your solar system." Jake felt his blood run cold. "And what do you believe?" "I believe," Zephyra said carefully, "that humanity has potential. But potential means nothing without proof. The hegemony has given you one standard galactic year to demonstrate that your species deserves to survive. If you fail, they will sterilize your worlds." The mining station's communication system crackled to life. "Captain Morrison, We're detecting multiple energy signatures approaching Europa. Unknown vessels, sir. They're not following any known flight patterns. Jake moved to the communication console, his military training taking over. How many ships, Lieutenant? 17, sir. And Captain, they're big. Bigger than anything in our fleet. Through the station's observation windows, Jake could see lights moving against the star field. Ships unlike anything humanity had ever built, their hulls seeming to bend light around them. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of technology far beyond human understanding. The hegemony, Zephyra said grimly. They're here to deliver their ultimatum personally. One of the alien ships moved closer to the station, and Jake felt the vibration of some kind of communication beam being established. The main screen flickered to life, showing a being that looked like it had been carved from living shadow. Its eyes were twin points of cold light, and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Humans of the third planet, the being intoned. I am Overlord Craxus of the hegemony. You have been judged and found wanting. Your species shows promise in technology, but lacks the wisdom to use it responsibly. You have one rotation of your planet around its star to prove otherwise. Jake stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. And how exactly are we supposed to prove ourselves? Craxus's laugh was like breaking glass. You will face the trials of worthiness. 3 challenges that will test your species' intelligence, courage, and capacity for growth. Succeed, and you will be granted membership in the galactic community. Fail, and your worlds will be cleansed of your presence. The screen went dark, leaving Jake, Rebecca, and Zephyra alone with the humming crystal and the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. So, Jake said, his voice steady despite the circumstances, what exactly are these trials? Zephyra's eyes held something that might have been hope. That's where it gets interesting, Captain. The trials aren't just tests of strength or knowledge. They're designed to reveal the true nature of a species. And from what I've observed of humanity, you might surprise everyone. The first trial, unity through diversity. The first trial came sooner than expected. Within hours of the hegemony's ultimatum, every human settlement in the solar system received the same message. Representatives from each colony world would be transported to a neutral testing ground. They would have 72 hours to solve a problem that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds for millennia. Jake found himself standing in what appeared to be a vast arena, but instead of gladiatorial combat, the space was filled with the most complex puzzle he'd ever seen. Floating geometric shapes shifted and rotated in 3-dimensional space, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to change meaning as he watched. The harmony equation, Zephyr explained, her voice carrying a note of respect. It said, to be the key to understanding how different species can coexist without conflict. The hegemony has been trying to solve it for over 1,000 years. Jake wasn't alone in the arena. Representatives from Mars, Luna, the asteroid belt colonies, and even the deep space research stations had been gathered. He recognized some faces. Dr. Patricia Hawkins from the Mars Terraforming Project, Engineer Carlos Mendez from the Luna mining operations, and Commander Lisa Park from the Asteroid Belt Defense Force. This is impossible, Dr. Hawkins muttered, studying the shifting equations. The variables change every time we think we understand the pattern. But Jake was watching something else. The human representatives weren't just trying to solve the puzzle individually. They were naturally falling into groups, sharing observations, building on each other's insights. It was exactly the kind of behavior that made the hegemony view humanity as chaotic and unpredictable. Wait, Jake said, a sudden insight hitting him. What if that's the point? What if the solution isn't mathematical at all? He watched as engineer. Mendez, who had grown up in the low gravity of Luna, pointed out patterns that the Mars-raised Dr. Hawkins couldn't see. Meanwhile, Commander Park, whose asteroid belt upbringing had taught her to think in 3 dimensions, was identifying connections that escaped everyone else. The puzzle isn't about finding the right answer, Jake realized. It's about finding the right people to answer it together. Working together, the human representatives began to piece together the equation. Dr. Hawkins' expertise in atmospheric dynamics helped them understand the flow patterns. Engineer Mendez's experience with complex mechanical systems revealed the underlying structure. Commander Park's tactical training showed them how to coordinate their efforts. And slowly, impossibly, the harmony equation began to resolve itself. The floating shapes aligned, the symbols stabilized, and a tone of perfect harmony filled the arena. Overlord Craxus materialized in the center of the space, his shadowy form radiating what Jake could only interpret as surprise. Impossible. The equation has remained unsolved for over 10 centuries. Maybe, Jake said, facing the hegemony leader with growing confidence, you were asking the wrong people to solve it. Or maybe you were asking the right people to solve it alone. Zephyra stepped forward, her expression showing something Jake was beginning to recognize as pride. The first trial is complete. Humanity has demonstrated the ability to achieve unity through diversity, to find strength in their differences, rather than despite them. Craxus's form flickered with what might have been uncertainty. 1 trial completed. 2 remain. Do not assume that your success here guarantees your survival, humans. But as the alien overlord disappeared, Jake caught something in his tone. For the first time, Craxus didn't sound entirely confident that humanity would fail. The second trial. Sacrifice and courage. The second trial arrived with devastating swiftness. Jake found himself aboard a hegemony vessel, its corridors filled with technology that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. He wasn't alone. Rebecca, Zephyra, and the other human representatives had been transported as well, but they'd been separated into different sections of the ship. The trial of sacrifice, Overlord Craxus announced, his voice echoing through the vessel's communication system. Your species claims to value individual life, yet you wage wars that cost millions of lives. You speak of heroism, yet you often act from self-interest. This trial will reveal the truth. Jake found himself in a chamber with walls that displayed star charts of the entire solar system. Earth, Mars, Luna, the asteroid colonies, the outer planet research stations, all of humanity's achievements spread out before him like a cosmic map. Choose, Craxus's voice commanded. The hegemony will spare 1 world in your solar system. The rest will be destroyed immediately. You have 1 hour to decide which of your colonies deserves to survive. The weight of the decision hit Jake like a physical blow. How could anyone choose between Earth, humanity's birth world, and Mars, where millions of colonists had built new lives? How could he weigh the Luna cities against the asteroid mining stations that fed humanity's expansion? But as Jake stared at the star charts, he realized something crucial. The trial wasn't about choosing which world to save. It was about proving that humanity wouldn't make that choice at all. I refuse, Jake said aloud, his voice carrying a strength he didn't know he possessed. Refuse? Craxus materialized in the chamber, his shadowy form seeming more solid than before. You would condemn your entire species rather than make it difficult. Decision? I would condemn my entire species rather than betray what makes us human, Jake replied. You want to know what humanity is really like? We're the species that runs into burning buildings to save strangers. We're the people who share our food with the hungry, even when we don't have enough for ourselves. We're the ones who built colonies on dead worlds because we believed we could make them live. Jake touched the star chart, and instead of selecting 1 world, he selected all of them. If humanity dies, we die together. If we live together. That's who we are. The chamber filled with light, and Jake heard something he'd never expected. Overlord Craxus laughing, but not with mockery. It was the sound of genuine surprise, and something that might have been respect. "Fascinating," Craxus said, his form becoming more defined, more real. "In over 3,000 years of administering these trials, no species has ever refused to choose. They always try to save some portion of themselves, even at the cost of the rest." Zephyra appeared in the chamber, her expression radiant with something Jake was beginning to recognize as hope. "The second trial is complete. Humanity has proven that their concept of sacrifice isn't about choosing what to lose. It's about choosing what to protect." "But the trial isn't over," Jake said, sensing there was more to come. "No," Zephyra agreed, "because now comes the real test. Craxus, show him." The star charts changed, revealing something that made Jake's blood run cold. The hegemony fleet wasn't just 17 ships. It was hundreds of vessels, enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. And they were moving toward Earth. "The final trial," Craxus said, his voice carrying new weight, "isn't about proving your worth to us. It's about proving your worth to yourselves. Your species faces extinction, Captain Morrison. How you respond will determine not just whether you survive, but whether you deserve to." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a familiar coat. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge, and somehow he'd become one of the people responsible for meeting it. The final stand. Humanity's greatest strength. The final trial wasn't a test. It was a war. Jake found himself back on Europa, but the mining station had been transformed into a command center. Representatives from every human colony had gathered, not because they'd been summoned, but because they'd chosen to come. "The hegemony fleet will reach Earth in 6 hours, Commander Park reported, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. "Our entire combined fleet is maybe 50 ships. They have over 300. Jake studied the tactical displays, his mind racing through possibilities. Humanity's ships were fast and maneuverable, but they were vastly outgunned. In a straight fight, the human fleet would be destroyed in minutes. "What do we know about their technology?" Rebecca asked, her scientific mind already working on the problem. "They're more advanced than us in almost every way," Zephyra admitted. "Their shields are stronger, their weapons more powerful, their ships larger, but they have one weakness." "Which is?" "They think like a collective. Every ship in their fleet follows the same tactical protocols, responds to the same command structure. They're efficient, but they're predictable." Jake felt something click into place. "And we're not." "No," Zephyra said, her eyes beginning to shine with understanding. "You're not. Humanity doesn't fight like other species. You improvise, you adapt, you find solutions that no one else would even consider." The plan that emerged was impossible, insane, and absolutely human. Instead of trying to match the hegemony's firepower, humanity would use their greatest strengths: creativity, unpredictability, and the willingness to take risks that other species would consider suicidal. The asteroid belt miners would use their deep space expertise to create a maze of debris fields. The Mars colonists would employ their terraforming technology to create sensor-blocking dust clouds. The Luna engineers would modify civilian cargo ships into one-time weapons platforms. "This is madness," Dr. Hawkins said, but she was smiling. As she said it, "Yeah," Jake agreed, "it absolutely is. And that's exactly why it might work." The battle, when it came, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The hegemony fleet, expecting a conventional military engagement, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Human ships appeared from impossible angles, struck with weapons that shouldn't exist, and disappeared before retaliation could be mounted. Jake watched from the command center as civilian cargo haulers, converted into massive kinetic weapons, slammed into hegemony cruisers. Mining ships, their equipment retrofitted for combat, carved through enemy formations with industrial cutting beams. Even the research vessels contributed, jamming enemy communications with equipment designed to study cosmic background radiation. They're adapting, Commander Park warned. The hegemony is learning our tactics. Then we change tactics, Jake replied. Signal all ships, Pattern Omega. Pattern Omega was the plan they'd hoped they wouldn't need. Every human ship in the fleet would converge on the hegemony flagship, regardless of cost. It was a suicide mission, but it might just save Earth. But as the human fleet began its final charge, something unexpected happened. The hegemony ships began to withdraw. Overlord Craxus's voice filled the command center. Enough. Stand down your vessels, humans. Sir? Commander Park asked, her finger hovering over the fire control. Jake held up a hand. Why? Because, Craxus, said his form materializing in the command center, you have proven something that we thought was impossible. You have shown that a species can be both individually chaotic and collectively brilliant. You fight like no other species in the galaxy. Not because you're more violent, but because you're more creative. Zephyra stepped forward, her expression filled with something that Jake realized was joy. The trials are complete. Humanity has proven that their greatest strength isn't their technology or their military might. It's their ability to find hope and solutions in impossible situations. Welcome to the galactic community, Craxus said, and for the first time, Jake saw the alien overlord smile. I have a feeling you're going to change everything. As Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning, he couldn't help but smile. After all, if there was one thing humans were good at, it was making the impossible possible. The voice had indeed warned of danger, but the eyes that whispered something deeper had been right all along. They'd whispered of hope, of potential, and of a future where humanity would stand among the stars, not as conquerors, but as partners in the greatest adventure of all.